Good evening, I'm Tom Murphy.
And I'm Amy Smith. We are live from Halifax's Neptune Theatre for the 2021 CBC Nova Scotia Leaders Debate.
For the next 90 minutes, the leaders of the three main political parties in this province will tackle some of the pressing issues facing Nova Scotia right now. We are joined tonight by Liberal Leader Iain Rankin, NDP Leader Gary Burrill, and PC Leader Tim Houston.
And here's how it will all work. The three parties have agreed to a format that divides the debate into 5 sections, each with a different theme. We'll tackle healthcare, the economy, diversity and inclusion, and the environment. And there's an opportunity for you to get involved as well. You can submit your questions to for our final section, or questions for the leader, the debate that will be happening toward the end of the 90 minutes here. You can do that by going to the CBC Nova Scotia Facebook page. We also have some video questions that will be coming our way, so watch for those tonight as well. The debate will begin and end with statements from all three of the leaders. That has been determined by a draw earlier. And Mr. Rankin, you are first up.
Thank you, Amy and Tom, for hosting tonight. And to all Nova Scotians, thank you for your support during the pandemic. Merci pour votre soutien pendant la pandémie. COVID has showed us that we can take on big challenges when we do it together. Nova Scotia is at a pivotal moment, and this election is your opportunity to help shape our future. This election is about our recovery. The choices we make now will impact us later on. We can't have billion-dollar deficits today without that impacting our future economy. But what we can do is get the recovery right. What we can do is create the jobs for today and for tomorrow. And we're already doing that. We are educating our workforce, boosting skilled trades. We are building modern healthcare facilities, recruiting more doctors, and expanding mental health supports. We've introduced $10 a day childcare for families, and we're increasing affordable housing stock for our booming population. Our climate plan builds on the sustainable revolution that is already underway in this province. We have so much optimism for the future, and with us, we'll continue to take this province forward by working together. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rankin. Mr. Houston, your opening remarks.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I love this province. It's been amazing to travel this province on the bus that we call the Solutions Express and get to meet Nova Scotians. Thank you to everyone who's honked and waved, and even to those who made some other hand gestures. But as diverse as this province is, Nova Scotians are united on one common thing. We need to fix healthcare. And we, as PCs, we're doing our part. We put forward some very bold, detailed solutions that will get you a doctor, that will improve dignity and comfort and the safety for our seniors, and will get Nova Scotians the mental health care they need free. We're the only party that's been upfront about what it will cost. And we've also been very clear that we will invest whatever it takes to get the job done. This is really important that we be open about the details. That's why we've been open about the details of our plan. As an accountant, I know that the details matter. After all, government is serious business. It requires common sense solutions, it requires thoughtfulness, and it requires a real plan, real solutions. So tonight, I look forward to sharing more of the details of our plan with you. I hope you hear something you like, and if you do, hire us, and we'll get to work. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Burrill, the leader of the NDP.
Hi. Here is what this election needs to be about. It needs to be about the people who are going to be forced from their homes by huge rent increases when temporary rent control is lifted, who deserve to have permanent rent control as it is enjoyed by a majority of people in our country. And it's about the person living under a cloud of anxiety and depression who deserves to know that they can have MSI-covered access to same-day, next-day mental health support. And it's about the young person, their whole future threatened by the climate emergency, who deserves to know that they live in a province that is uncompromising about greenhouse gas limits that are in keeping with what's required of Nova Scotia. And it's about the parent who can't go to work and make an income because the cost of childcare makes that out of the question. Who deserves to have affordable childcare as it's available elsewhere in our country? And it's about the person in long-term care who, when they go and ring their buzzer, deserves to know that they're going to be answered in a timely and prompt way because there's adequate number of staff there in that facility. In other words, this election is about real people and their real lives and getting a government that puts them front and center, which we in the NDP are ready to provide. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Burrill, and we want to start the debate now. The order of which leader speaks first in each section has also been determined by a draw. Then we will open up the debate and have some follow-up questions. Our first topic tonight is of importance to us all, is health care. CBC reported this month that at least 25 nurses quit in the last 2 months without even having another job lined up. Nova Scotia Health has 20% vacancies. Temporary closures of rural ERs are constant. What are you going to do to solve the staffing problems facing healthcare in this province? And Mr. Rankin, you can start us off.
Thank you for the question. And first of all, I want to thank those hardworking frontline healthcare workers who were heroes throughout the pandemic. They worked so hard to keep Nova Scotians safe. And we do certainly have challenges in healthcare. This is not new. Provinces across the country are faced with these issues. But what we've done is we've made targeted investments to recruit healthcare providers, allied healthcare providers, including the nurses that Amy referenced there. We have created in our plan, we've created 270 new seats at the Nova Scotia Community College so that we can build out, so we have opportunities for licensed practice nurses. We've had opportunities for RNs to upgrade to nurse practitioners. We've doubled the amount of nurse practitioners that we have in our province while in government. We have a lot more work to do. We've had challenges recruiting throughout the pandemic. We do have doctors waiting to get in, and we have other healthcare providers waiting to get in. But Nova Scotia is on the move. Everybody wants to be in Nova Scotia. That includes healthcare workers. And what a government should be working on right now is not only recruiting them, but ensure that we invest in the infrastructure, the modern infrastructure, the technology, the equipment that new providers that are coming to this province want to practice in.
All right, Mr. Burrill, how would you address the staffing problems?
We know that in so many levels of the providing of health care in Nova Scotia, staff, people, professionals are talking about being stressed at unbelievable levels of dealing with chronic levels of burnout, of having to do 2 people's work, 3 people's work every single day, working short all the time. So the first thing we need to do is ensure that there's adequate staffing everywhere, adequate staffing in hospitals, adequate staffing in long-term care. One of the primary reasons that we have difficulties recruiting in the sector of long-term care is that there are inadequate staff on the floors of our institutions, and as a consequence, people are doing things like doing lifts that require more staff than is there and are often getting hurt. So respect for the medical professionals of the province requires that there be adequate staffing at every level in mental health care. Emergency care is a very prime example where we have intense levels of burnout related to overcrowding. This again has to do with lack of investment in hospital and nursing homes so that people can be transferred from emergency rooms and into hospitals. So adequate staffing across the board.
Okay, Mr. Burrill, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Houston, your plan.
Thank you for the question. Healthcare is in crisis in this province. You referenced nurses for sure, and nurses have borne the brunt of the pandemic in so many ways. You could have also mentioned CCAs. You could have mentioned paramedics. You could have mentioned doctors. We have a crisis in every part of this province. As a matter of fact, my family just received a notice that our doctor is retiring. That's our doctor for our extended family, leaving in August, and my 20-year-old son said, well, Nanny and Grampy can just get another doctor, can't they? And the reality is that a 20-year-old shouldn't be worrying about whether their grandparents can get a doctor in this province, and that's where we're at. And people will remember that the Liberals promised a doctor for every Nova Scotian. They failed on that. They didn't even really try. So we've been very honest about what is necessary in healthcare. It will cost money to fix the healthcare system. It can't happen overnight, but there is a better way, and we've put forward our solutions. And these aren't just sales pitches during a campaign. We've been working on detailed solutions for over a year, listening and working with Nova Scotians. And I'll tell you why it matters. It matters because just 2 weeks ago in HRM, a young child playing in a sports game had a medical emergency. And we've all been there in those rinks when these things happen, when a player's down, there's a hush over the whole entire rink. And they called an ambulance, and they waited. And they waited. And you can imagine the anxiety of everyone in that rink. 45 minutes later, the family decided they couldn't wait anymore. They had to make the difficult decision to transport the child on their own. What an impossible decision to have to make. We have so far to go in this province, and we've been very clear about what is possible for this province, investing in nurses, investing in paramedics, investing in nurses. All these things are necessary, investing in long-term care. Okay. There is a better way for this province. It won't happen overnight, and it will cost money. We are prepared to fix the healthcare system. That is job one for the PC.
Mr. Houston, I want to ask you about the cost of fixing that and where you find the money. For example, would you consider permanently closing some of those rural ERs that are often closed on weekends or other times because of staffing shortages? Could you find savings there?
Well, listen, it's going to cost money to fix the healthcare system, and we are not prepared to disadvantage a community. We've been very clear on the investment we'd make, $400 million in the first year, because we need to fix the healthcare system. When people move here and can't get a doctor, when nurses can't take a break at work. So what I would say is we have to grow the economy. We put a very robust plan on economic growth, but we're not going to cut corners on healthcare.
Okay,
People
Mr. Rankin, do you want to jump in on this?
Well, I think it shouldn't be a competition of who can spend the most money. What he's proposing actually can put future core services like healthcare at risk.
But what about rural ERs? Would you close them?
The communities have to be part of the conversation. So we had the North Side in New Waterford building up in Cape Breton that have been transitioning over to a model that has community-based care, that has better access for long-term care. So this has to be part of the conversation with communities, but we won't close a hospital without that engagement with communities. It's important that they have...
But Iain, you did. You walked into those communities and said, we're closing your hospital without no plan, and sent a lot of anxiety. What we need to be very clear of in this province, we need a good healthcare system. If we're talking about Cape Breton, Iain wants to talk about Cape Breton, the third highest mortality rate in the country is at Cape Breton Regional. Not 1 year,
which is
2 years, 3 years in a row.
Which is why we're making the right investments.
Yeah,
this is historic.
Look,
billions of dollars in capital that this province has never seen in our redevelopment projects. Not only in Cape Breton,
no idea how to solve the healthcare crisis.
In Halifax, in Yarmouth with more cancer care.
Let's let Mr. Burrill hop in.
These are the investments that we need to make in Nova Scotia.
Mr. Burrill, would you close rural ERs, and some of them at least?
The thing that needs to be understood about rural emergency centers and rural hospitals is that they provide a kind of care that has the most effective outcomes when it's delivered in the context of one's community. So I'm talking about the treatment of often chronic conditions that have periodic flare-ups, extended rehabilitation periods, also palliative care. This was also true of the hospitals that are being closed in the North Side and in New Waterford, which I think is a very ill-considered position on the part of the government because these are the kinds of services, what community hospitals offer through the hospital as a whole, including the ER, that have the best medical outcomes when they're delivered in the context a person calls home.
Okay, Mr. Burrill, thank you.
So that redevelopment is expanding the regional at CBRM, expanding the regional at Glace Bay. This is about an evidence-based approach and making sure that we have the appropriate model of care for our aging population. We don't need four
The issue is it's going to take leadership focused on healthcare. We've been very focused on healthcare.
Very supportive. We just put the tender out for the North Side.
The first time that Iain mentioned healthcare in this campaign was yesterday, day 11.
Option within that hospital, and people in the North Side are very excited about that.
But Iain, in fairness, if you think about the doctor situation, your government said just 2 weeks ago, no problem recruiting doctors in this province. Now, yesterday, when you're kind of on the ropes politically in this campaign, came out with a plan to come up with a committee. We're not into committees. We're into action in the PC party.
We never said there's no problem.
Okay.
And all provinces have challenges.
I want to
ask you. Road on healthcare, Iain.
We want to ask you.
The pandemic slowed down the process, no question. But we've been recruiting doctors, nurse practitioners, people from all over the world.
Okay, let's talk about the doctor shortage if we may. Gentlemen, if we may.
Provide initiatives for doctors.
We were making progress on addressing the doctor shortage, or the family doctor shortage in this province, but the wait list has grown again through the pandemic. The number of Nova Scotians who need a family doctor has grown by roughly 20,000 and now sits at nearly 70,000. So, Mr. Rankin, is it realistic to think that all Nova Scotians could have a family doctor?
Nova Scotians deserve to see a doctor when and where they need it. So we're working on the model of care has changed. Doctors, family doctors used to see 5,000 patients. The model of care has changed into more collaborative care teams. That's where new doctors coming in want to practice in. That's why we've increased nurse practitioners in these collaborative care centers. We need to have mental health availability at these clinics. But yes, the pandemic slowed down recruitment, and that's why we have almost 80 people, doctors, waiting to come into our province that we should be able to get here by the fall, but it did slow down the progress. There's
Okay,
no
Mr.
question.
Burrill, quickly.
Everyone should have access to primary health care. And although there are lots of difficulties and complexities about this question, we certainly need to recognize that. There is a path to seeing that that's provided. And the path is composed of seeing that all primary care providers are working to the full extent of their scope. I'm talking about nurse practitioners, social workers, advanced care paramedics, but particularly physician assistants. Many other jurisdictions are using the role of physician assistants to extend the physicians we have to serve the population that we're trying to serve. We don't do that in Nova Scotia, although it's core to the model of care in the Canadian Armed Forces. I think this is the first step we need to take on that path, which can lead to a solution, to have a primary care provider for everyone in the province.
Mr.
All right,
Houston, you want to make a
Mr.
final point there?
If you want to fix healthcare in this province, you need to change the government because you need to change the culture. Right now, we have doctors that are afraid to speak up when they see things that can be done differently. We have nurses that are afraid to speak up, and that's a real shame in this province. We have to support our healthcare professionals because they're supporting Nova Scotians. They did everything they can during this pandemic. Now it's time for the government to say, we respect you. We want to work with you. How can we help? And that's what the PC party has been saying.
Now,
From
Mr.
the guy
Houston,
that
how can you
criticized
fault the
public health
process
workers during the
that's...
pandemic. This is the guy that criticized the vaccine rollout, criticized the top doctor we have in this province, and the vaccine rollout that he organized. Every single question in the House that he asked in this last session was about the failure,
It's
so-called
the-
failure.
it's
That's
the
the
job-
words you used.
Here's what I would
You
say.
refused
when-
to say that
when
they were
it's-
leaders.
When
The public health
when
people
a
delivering
member of the
vaccine.
legislature questions the government on something, it's not because they're criticizing, they just want to know. And here's what I would say.
Did you
If
not
you feel
call it
like you're
slow?
being criticized, look in the mirror because you got to make better decisions on how you support Nova Scotians. If you can't stand
Did you
stand
not
there and
say
be
that
accountable
that
to
we were
Nova
slow?
Scotians,
Did you
as
not say the
Premier,
vaccine
I
rollout?
will be accountable to you. If Mr. Rankin's not willing to,
So
I
he's
am.
not willing to
All
say
right,
that he said they were slow.
Mr. Houston, how can you fault the process that's being used to recruit doctors in the province when before the pandemic, the wait list dropped dramatically?
It's not me that has to fault it. It's 70,000 Nova Scotians that are trying to get access to care. And I can tell you, as somebody who just received notice, and when I look at my in-laws, who are lovely people, but aging, and my concern for them, they don't know where to turn right now. So it's the evidence is obvious. 70,000 people don't have access to a family doctor. 399 people died in this province last year waiting for surgery. We have a crisis in healthcare. We will fix the healthcare system. We will make the investments because you're worth it.
All right, gentlemen, we have our first viewer question tonight, and it pertains to long-term care in this province. Let's have a listen.
Hello, my name is Sela Bourgeois. I'm an LPN and a resident of Whitby Pair who works in long-term care facilities. We have an aging population. People are beginning to enter long-term care at a younger age due to comorbidities, as well as the increasing diagnosis of dementia. People are also living longer. Currently, we do not have the facilities or the beds needed for people in long-term care. So my question is, what is your strategy to increase the beds needed in long-term care, as well as provide quality care and shorter wait times?
All right, Mr. Burrill, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, of all the areas where the Liberals have fallen short, I think the provision of long-term care facilities is very near the top of the list. In 8 years, at a time of an unprecedented aging tsunami in our society, they built a total of 57 new nursing home beds, 13 in Cape Breton, and that is all. We know coming out of the pandemic that we will need to have one room for every resident in long-term care, and each needs to have their own washroom, and we can't do that without a major move forward of construction. That construction has fallen seriously behind during these 8 years. I also want to say about this that there is in all long-term care facilities, there is the chronic problem of understaffing. And the reason we have the understaffing, to a great extent, is that although the needs of residents have greater than they were a few years ago because of the aging that our guest has mentioned, the staff-to-resident ratios have remained largely the same as they were years ago. So we need to have staff-to-resident ratios legislated and funded to provide the level of care that's needed in the real nursing homes of the province.
All right, thank you. And before I go to you, Mr. Rankin, just a reminder that when you're talking over each other, it's hard for viewers to understand, and especially folks listening in on radio. So just a reminder. So, Mr. Rankin.
So we've made a historic announcement about a few weeks ago, and it was to invest in not only the replacement of beds at the 17 sites that required it, that were aged and needed to have those single occupancy rooms across the province, but we also announced another 280 beds, so that we have a total of 500 that will be tendered out in August. Sheila is correct. We need to build more. There are some under construction right now in Cape Breton and in the South Shore and different parts of the province that need it the most. But this is something that came up and that was highlighted through the pandemic, and it needs investment, not only in capital, but in operating. And that's why we do have reports that we're following. These are independent reports, and we will make the investments required because the seniors of this province deserve it.
Mr. Houston, how do you fix long-term care?
Celia, thank you for what you're doing. I can't imagine going to start your shift and thinking probably not going to get a break today for lunch, bathroom, otherwise. But what I would say to you is help us on the way. We've made this a priority for the PC party a year ago, a full year ago, way before an election. We put out a very detailed plan called Dignity for Seniors, where we talked about the need to invest in 2,500 new single rooms, the need to invest in 2,000 staff. And yeah, it's expensive. But the bill is already sitting on the table. It just so happens that Iain's government has chose to look the other way. And when I heard Iain say a couple of weeks ago that he was concerned about over-investing in seniors, it just brought a lot of things back home for me, because we know that that's the same voice that was around the cabinet table when Northwood said, we need some money for some renovations to keep people safe in 2017. And Iain's team said, no, we have no money for you. And they made the same request in 2018. We need some money to keep seniors safe. No, we have no money for you. And again in 2019, same thing. No. Now look what happened. Tragic loss of life at Northwood. What happened at Northwood is a black mark on our generation. It's a stain on our generation, and I will not allow that to happen. We will invest in seniors, and we will make sure that they can age with dignity in this province.
Mr. Houston, you're talking about investing, adding beds. You're talking about hiring 2,000 new health professionals. There is a national staffing shortage that's on right now. Where are you going to find that staff?
Well, we have something that lots of other places don't have. We have a quality of life. People want to live in this province, but they want to work for a government.
Wouldn't they be here already if that was the case?
Well, no, because they want to work for an employer that respects them. And look at the staffing shortage. Look how they're treated in this system. So that's why I say we need to change the channel. We need to have a government that respects those on the front line. Last year, when there was additional money for pandemic pay, Iain's team gave nurses and CCAs the runaround and said, well, some of you get it and some of you don't get it. No, let's change the channel. Let's treat people that are living and working in this province with respect. I can tell you, with a PC government that is willing to invest in healthcare, willing to invest in seniors, willing to invest in Nova Scotians, coupled with the incredible quality of life that we offer, people will want to come here and work for a PC government and do what they were trained to do, which is support seniors.
Mr. Rankin, what's an acceptable wait time for a long-term care bed?
2 months. So we have an evidence-based approach right now. It is too long right now. It's roughly 6 months on average, and this is the evidence-based approach from professionals that we worked with hand in hand. We don't need to overbuild because we need that capital in other areas of long-term care and in healthcare. So to build 2,500 beds, when we have a wait list of 1,800, when the time that they spend in long-term care is on average 3 years, we're going to end up with empty rooms. So it's not about not having enough money to invest in seniors. We will invest. The pandemic proved that this government will invest where and when it's required.
The problem
Healthcare,
is, you're behind the ball already. We have a tsunami coming towards us. If you look at our demographics, you're already way behind.
We have an aging
what
population,
I'm saying is we're going
and
to
that's
catch
why
up
we're
and get
building.
in front, because
And
our seniors are worth it in this province.
Mr. Burrill, you
We've got
want
a
to
lot of mess to clean up from this Liberal government, but we're willing to
Mr.
do it.
Rankin, with every respect, about nursing homes in Nova Scotia, did you just use the word overbuild?
Overbuild seats.
Do you not acknowledge?
We don't want empty seats.
Do you not acknowledge that in the 8 years in which your party has been in power, the grand total of new nursing home beds that were built was 57? Is that not a fact?
We have more underway, and we've been investing in home care. Nova Scotians, if they can, want to stay at home. That's why every single budget, we've increased our budget for home care. Yes, the pandemic has highlighted the need to make investments in long-term care, and that's why we're doing that. That's why in this budget, we had historic investments, $100 million increase. Now our budget is over $1 billion in continuing care, but what we don't need is a competition that can throw more and more money at an issue. We need to work with professionals, to work with the frontline
something,
staff.
Ian. It was obvious to everyone except you guys. It was obvious to the folks at Northwood. It was obvious to all Nova Scotians that the situation was being ignored. It might have highlighted it for you, but everyone else in the room
We'd like
knew.
to move on to the economy now. The pandemic has highlighted the demand for decent housing at an affordable rate here in Nova Scotia. So let's start this topic off with another one of our viewer questions.
Hello, my name is Katie Jean. You may know me as @KATY, not IE on Twitter. What will your government be doing to implement rent control and make housing more affordable in Nova Scotia? Thank you.
All right there, Mr. Burrill, you can start us off here.
This is an excellent question. An NDP government will immediately implement permanent rent control so that protection from unsubstantiated, dramatic, sudden rent increases will be enjoyed by the people of our province as it is enjoyed by a majority of Canadians today. And often, my opponents have said about this that rent control doesn't work. But I am telling you that for the person that is facing a $450 sudden increase on the basis of which they are about to have to leave their home, when rent control is brought in and then all of a sudden they don't have to do that packing, it works for sure.
All right, Mr. Houston, what do you have to say?
Katie, thank you for that. It's an important issue, and certainly it's on the minds of Nova Scotians. And I grew up in duplexes. My parents were renters. I had a discussion with my parents about how much stress they must have felt when a possible rent increase was coming down the road. So I know about it. I feel it. We have a housing crisis in this province. It didn't develop overnight. It took years and years coming because the government was not really focused on it. But it's here now. And what I would say is there's no magic wand. There's no overnight fix. Anyone who says there is misleading you. We need to be honest. And we've got a couple things in our platform that will address the real root of the issue, which is we need more housing stock. We need more supply. The answer to a housing crisis is more housing supply. So we have in our thing, we need to encourage the construction of more housing. Sometimes that's limited. Often that's limited in this province by a shortage of tradespeople. We want young tradespeople coming to this province. We have something in our platform. If you're under 30 and you're working in the trades, no personal provincial income tax on your first 50. We need people going in the trades. We need tradespeople moving here, tradespeople staying here, because we need to build more housing stock. But the housing crisis is across the spectrum. Some people say affordable. I use the word attainable because I spoke to a young lady in the Valley. Her and her partner in their 20s. They both have good jobs. They bid on 3 homes and been outbid. They can't afford housing. That's a problem in this province, but there's no magic solution. And Gary, I know your heart's in the right place, but I would say to you that saying to Nova Scotians that rent control will solve the housing crisis is the equivalent of saying to them in 2013 that you'd have a doctor for every Nova Scotian.
Okay, before we get into that, I want to give Mr. Rankin,
But the
just excuse me just a minute.
do you support rent control?
Excuse me, Mr. Burrill.
I
Mr.
do
Burrill.
not. Rent control will not work. We need more housing supply. in
As
this
per the
province.
rules, Mr. Rankin is supposed to get the third crack at this question, so Mr. Rankin, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom, and it's a great question, Katie. So we need to take a balanced approach here. Rent control is one tool of many that is at the disposal of government. Regulating rent was an important tool during the pandemic with such low vacancy rates. I did feel that it's not the majority of landlords, but the few that did have astronomical rent increases being posed to residents that didn't have recourse to move out, that's not acceptable. So I agreed with rent control. We've had the Housing Commission set up that has a range of people at the table. Private sector, nonprofit advocates are at the table, and they came to a consensus to say that rent control should remain in place until the state of emergency is removed. We're following that evidence-based approach. I agree with Tim that it is, at its core, a supply issue. So we need to stimulate that growth of supply, and that's why we've accepted those short-term recommendations. We're investing $25 million as asked for from that report. And even before then, we've invested $6.4 million so that we have permanent, supportive housing to address the homelessness issue. And that's what we need to do.
Same question, though. Do you or do you not support permanent rent control beyond the state of emergency? That's what we've been asked.
I think I answered that. I'm following the experts that had the Housing Commission that said it should be relieved after the state of emergency. My condition is that we need to have that supply, and if we follow the other recommendations, we make those key investments so that we have a more healthy vacancy rate, then rent control is not needed.
That's a long no.
All right, every province is talking about, of course, how to rebuild post-pandemic. What does economic recovery for the province look like in a government that you would lead? And Mr. Burrill, I'll ask you to begin here.
We need to recognize that we are coming through the greatest economic contraction that has been experienced by anybody in Nova Scotia under the age of 85. And in this election, we have two very different, very clear paths being set forward of how to recover from that contraction. The path that is being set forward by Mr. Rankin and the Liberal Party is the path of moving out of the COVID deficit over a very short period of just 4 years, and doing that by taking $209 million out of the provincial spending in the first year following the election, which in my judgment cannot but cause harm to communities, to hospitals, and to our schools. A second path is that we expand our way towards recovery by addressing the real needs that have come to the surface during the pandemic. So we address the need about childcare and boost the GDP that happens when women are able to go into the workforce. We address the need about long-term care and all the jobs that will be created there. We address the need for a strengthened, boosted consumer purchasing power by a $15 minimum wage on the road to a living wage, and with permanent rent control.
Mr. Burrill, how will you pay for all of that? And when will we see a fully costed platform from the NDP?
Well, this is a two-part answer. Part one is how you don't pay for it. So you don't pay for it by doing what the Liberal Party did. One day before the WHO declared the global pandemic, they passed in the legislature a $70 million tax break for the corporations of the province, thereby tying the government's hands to the tune of $70 million for what they were able to do to support the people of the province in the pandemic. And you don't do it by cutting $209 million. But you do it by spending smart. So we live in a province today that spends $1 million every single day housing people in the hospital who aren't hospital patients, because the government only opened 57 new beds and has no place for them in nursing homes. We can do better than that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burrill. Okay, Mr. Houston, what does your plan for economic recovery for Nova Scotia look like?
Thank you. And two facts are on my mind when it comes to the economy. One is that people are struggling. We talked about housing. Gas is going up. Groceries are going up. People are really struggling, and their paychecks aren't going up. So we need to increase paychecks across this province. And the second thing is, if we're serious about fixing healthcare, and I am very serious about fixing healthcare, then we need to jumpstart our economy. We need to get our economy going. And after 8 years of sleepwalking through a doctor shortage, the status quo in this province won't cut it anymore. We need some innovative ideas, some bold ideas. And we've put forward in our platform some very innovative ideas. And one is the better paycheck guarantee. We're going to give corporations of this province a very simple choice. Pay it to the government in taxes, or get half back and give it to your employees. This will raise the wages of the working families of this province. And then the second thing we're talking about is the Nova Scotia Loyal. I'm very excited about this program. Every politician says buy local, and then they go away and don't do anything. This is government policy that will actually encourage Nova Scotians to consume local products. It will grow our economy. It will put more money in the hands of Nova Scotians. We're looking out 10 years when we're talking about it. We're not looking about an election cycle or a 30-day campaign. We're looking 10 years out. And I will tell you, I'm very proud that two of the top economists in the country have applauded the platform we put forward and said this is the type of innovative thinking that's needed.
Thank you for that,
we
Mr.
need
Houston.
new ideas. PC Party has them.
We'd like to get to Mr. Rankin for his thoughts on what post-pandemic recovery might look like under his government.
Well, I think one of the biggest success stories in this province under our government was the profound economic growth that we saw before the pandemic. So we had our exports booming, we had record tourism years, we had population growing, it's now at an all-time high. Unemployment was at an all-time low, and actually we've dropped our unemployment already by 1% since the close of the third wave. We need to continue on that strain, get back to those levels. People want to be here in Nova Scotia because of the quality of life that we spoke about tonight, but we need strategies to make sure that we have the right training. When we're talking about housing, we need those trades. If you ask a business owner, they don't want a tax cut of $200 million when we're in already a deficit that grows the deficit to $1 billion. The number one thing they need is access to labor. They need skilled tradespeople. That's how we're going to build our housing stock. Our infrastructure strategy will help stimulate growth during this time. We have a sustainable revolutioning happening here with our tender, the biggest tender of renewable energy in our history going out now that will create 4,000 jobs in rural communities across the province. We're investing in training in the digital economy because we're in the midst of a digital boom right now. So at our universities, at the Nova Scotia Community College, we have tremendous opportunities here and partnerships that we can build with our institutions. And we are on the right track. Before the pandemic hit, we were on the right track, and we need to get back to that.
Okay, quickly, Gary wants to hear Mr. Burrill.
Right track. The truth is that we had, going into the pandemic, the single lowest median income in all of Canada. We had that after one term of the Liberal Party, and we have it now after a second term of the Liberal Party. It indicates a great remove from the reality of people's daily financial life to talk about our being in a position of economic strength when the core thing about an economy and economic strength is people's incomes. That is a fact. The lowest median income in the country.
Which is why we need an equitable recovery, which is why we're bringing in $10 a day childcare to build on the pre-primary program that was the biggest social program in my lifetime in the province, and that will help make sure that we have families out in the workforce. We need to continue to look at these programs to ensure now we actually have the lowest poverty rate in Atlantic Canada. These are the social programs that help move these key performance indicators.
Gary referred to Iain's list, which is actually Stephen McNeil's list. We've all heard it a number of times. Gary once referred to it as a litany of wonders, and I got to admit, Gary, I had to Google that to see what it meant, but you're right. And the reality is that though that list may sound nice in the boardrooms, but out in the doorsteps, where I'm looking people in the eyes, we have the third highest child poverty rate. People are struggling. So that list, put it to the side. Now what we need to do is think about where do we go? How do we go forward? How do we increase the wages of the working families of this province? We've put two very innovative, bold ideas on the table. I've yet to hear one from Iain about where we go. Because, you know, green jobs are nice, but a green job 4 years from now doesn't pay for the groceries tomorrow, and I'm worried about tomorrow for the working families of this province.
Conservative, they don't see the sustainable revolution that's happening right now in this province. Our efficiency programs going to net zero, this is already happening. This isn't 4 years in the future. This is our opportunity to
People need
grasp
more higher
right
wages
now.
right now.
And this is
Iain.
what the progressive economics are saying.
We need higher wages for Nova Scotians right now. The better paycheck guarantee will do that right away. The loyal program will do that right away.
Artificially
Bold,
pay
innovative
workers more.
ideas.
To Mr. Rankin's point about childcare program addressing the income crisis and the lowest median incomes in the country.
Putting that in your platform too, Gary.
I want to say about this, that last weekend, my younger daughter got married, and it is literally the case that when I was holding her in my arms, Liberals were coming before elections and talking about promisings that they were going to bring a comprehensive childcare program. We have been hearing about this for over 25 years. The difference between the program that's being put forward by the Liberal Party and the program of childcare that's being put forward by the New Democratic Party is that the NDP is actually going to do it.
All right, well, now the pandemic has reinforced how important frontline service workers are to the economy. Places like grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies, they kept us going. But those are among the lowest paid and least protected workers in our province. So what would a government led by one of you do to help them earn a better living? Mr. Rankin.
Yeah, I think that we have to look at the economy as a whole. So we have strategies to boost the competitive types of industries that we have, whether it's the oceans here, the work that's happening at Cove and the other industries, traditional sectors, supporting innovation, partnerships. These will help boost the whole economy, which will allow employers to pay more. I know Gary's advocating for minimum wage to be increased overnight. I don't think small businesses can have that burden right now. We will get to $15 minimum wage, no question. But we need to focus on the fundamentals. With our economy, we have a booming population. People want to be here. We need to make sure that they're trained and that government is a partner to create the jobs for tomorrow.
Okay, Mr. Houston.
Day one, better paycheck guarantee. This is a program that will give your boss, everyone working in those essential services that went to work every single day in the pandemic, and oftentimes they were afraid, but they went to work every single day to keep things rolling for us. Day one, your boss is going to have a choice. Pay money to the government in taxes, or get half of it back and give it to you. And I think they're going to choose you because I'm choosing you. This is not a program that is limited exclusively to minimum wage workers. This will help minimum wage workers, but it will help a heck of a lot of other workers in this province. So day one, PC government, better paycheck guarantee. We will support you. We need to raise the wages of the working families of this province from one end of the province to the other. No matter what your job is, you need to earn more money, and we're putting the innovative policy forward that will help you do that.
All right, Mr. Burrill, what do you have to say?
Well, in my view, the program that Mr. Houston has just spoken about is deeply ill-considered. We think in the NDP that corporations should do two things all the time. They should pay their taxes to the public, and they should pay their employees properly, and they should never be in a position where they can only choose to do one thing or the other. But I want to say about $15. There is no time when a $15 minimum wage has been more important than a time when we need to be moving into recovery, because you can't have an economic recovery that's strong unless people have some purchasing power and have some money in their pocket. In a province that has a third of our people working for wages, working for less than $15, it is very difficult for us to think about having a strong economic recovery going forward. So this is the very moment, not for the Liberal $12.55 minimum wage, but for the NDP $15 an hour minimum wage, moving towards getting down the road towards a living wage, which is the place where we need to go.
Mr. Rankin, if I can ask you, your opponents have been suggesting during the campaign that the priority should be on more spending and taking longer to balance the books. You're saying you want to do it by the end of 4 years. Why is that the right way to go, and what would you go about cutting to make that happen?
Well, somebody's got to pay for all this spending, and the reality is in this fiscal year, $350 million of our expenses are associated with COVID, whether that's PPE, supports for small businesses that were forced to close. So that's obviously going to be reduced. We are prepared to spend when we need to. We've been criticized for spending too much, but we need to make sure that we are taking a balanced approach because we don't have endless amounts of money, and I think that billion-dollar deficits with a capital B from both the opposition parties is just too much to burden future generations with.
What I would say is, as an accountant, I understand the numbers. 20 years in business, I understand the ramifications of the numbers, but here's the reality. We need to fix healthcare. The Liberals have left a big, big bill on the table. They've chosen to look the other way and ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist. What we're saying to Nova Scotians is, we're going to come along and clean it up. We're going to pick up that bill, and we're going to deal with it. And then we're going to grow the economy over 10 years to make sure that we pay for it, because we have to look to the future. And if we don't have a healthcare system in this province that works, if we continue to look away and have a healthcare system that's in crisis, where you can't get an ambulance, where seniors can't live with dignity, we cannot grow the province. And I don't want to grow a province like that. I want to grow a province where government does what it's supposed to. They didn't do it, and we will.
Quickly,
Mr.
Mr.
Burrill,
Burrill.
last word for you.
Mr. Rankin's thought that we will move out of a deficit position over a short period of 4 years is a piece of fiscal foolishness. Every single province in Canada that has set a timeline for coming out of the COVID deficit has set a longer one than that, 6, often 7, often 8 years, because they understand if you compress that into a shorter period, you're going to choke off the recovery, as exactly is going to happen in Nova Scotia if Mr. Rankin gets a chance to get in a position to make his $209 million cuts in the year following the election.
Two of those provinces had to borrow from the Bank of Canada to get out of COVID. One of the reasons that we handled the pandemic so well is because we were one of the few on a sustainable fiscal path, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. That's how we were able to invest in programs and people that needed it the most, because we had 4 balanced budgets in a row, all of which both of those members voted against.
Okay, we've got to move on.
You got there by putting people's lives in danger and not supporting healthcare. I won't do that.
Look at the historic healthcare bill that's happening all over the province.
We will fix healthcare, and we will grow the economy. We're the only party that's put a real plan out there and has been forthright with Nova Scotians
All right,
about
Mr.
what has
Houston,
to be done.
thank you very much. We're moving on to diversity and inclusion. Members of our Black and Indigenous communities are not treated equally by police and in our justice system. What will you do about addressing this, Mr. Houston?
This is an important, such an important issue for sure. It's important that we start with government. Government that is for the people has to come from the people. And I'm very proud that one of the first things I did when I became leader of the PC party was establish a diversity committee. And I want to thank Betty Thomas and that committee for all of the work they did. We have the most diverse slate of candidates that the PC party has ever put forward. But, you know, leaders, it starts with leaders. Leaders have to walk the walk. And all of us in leadership positions have a responsibility to walk that walk. We're three white men up here, and even our political journeys have had ups and downs for sure, but it's nothing in comparison to what women or people of color or other minorities have experienced in the political system. So we need to do a lot better. And for me, it starts with knowledge. Knowledge leads to understanding, and understanding leads to kindness. We need more kindness in this province. That's why we're going to focus on the education system, put diversity education at every single grade level through the education system, so we can teach our children about our history, the good, bad, the ugly, and make sure that they are kind to one another. And that starts at the top in government. It has to go all the way through all of our government offices and everything else in this province. So
Mr.
it's very
Rankin.
important.
So we have, unfortunately, systemic racism in all of our institutions. When I came in as Premier, it was a priority for me to create a new Office of Equity and Anti-Racism. This is how we work horizontally across government to tackle these really tough issues, difficult conversations. I recognize my own white privilege, and I need people that are reflective of the population of Nova Scotia in senior leadership roles. I'm proud of the appointments that we've made. It follows on Stephen McNeil when he was the Premier, nominating more diversity to the bench, ensuring that we had better diversity reflected in the justice system. That's what we need to do, and that's why our candidates are more diverse this time, more than ever before. We have 5 African Nova Scotians, including Angela Simmons, who is one of the most known experts in the Land Titles Initiative. I was really proud to learn from her and to take that issue on in the office as we've taken on other issues like the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute, ensuring that we put funding in so that the community could lead that initiative. We've also done work around race-based data so that we can tackle systemic racism in our health system. We need to do a lot more. This is scratching the surface, but there is work to do alongside communities, and that's why we are committed to ensure that we expand that office and that we tackle these issues head on.
Okay, Mr. Burrill.
I would only add to what Mr. Houston and Mr. Rankin have said, that it is very important for us all to recognize the reality of racism in Nova Scotia in many different forms. And yet it's also true that this has been recently a time of importantly increased awareness. I've never had an experience as I've been having on the doorsteps in this campaign so far, asking people what are the issues that they would like to have brought forward, and having them point to an orange shirt hanging in the porch and say reconciliation. I had the best Canada Day, most meaningful one I think I ever had 3 weeks ago when thousands of people came to Peace and Friendship Park, many of them with orange shirts representing Every Child Matters. I think last summer we saw the enormous outpouring across the province in Black Lives Matter, not just in Halifax, but in substantial demonstrations in Mabou and Shelburne and other places. And yet at this moment, there are some things that need to be done immediately, which the government has not seen to. One of those is the implementation of the entirety of the Wortley Report, with all its provisions about street checks, including those that allow wiggle room for this illegal process to continue. Another of them is to adopt provincially all of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that apply in the provincial jurisdiction. In the NDP, 3 times since the 2015 publication of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we have presented legislation to the legislature calling for the adoption of every call to action there within the provincial jurisdiction, and 3 times when we have done that, the Liberal government has not acted on that initiative. I think we can do better than that. Wortley Report, TRC.
Iain mentioned the African Nova Scotia Justice Institute. That's a good initiative, and I applaud that. But when I talk about walking the walk, we need to do it in our political parties. And over the last couple weeks, we've seen very negative national headlines that confirm that sexism is real here in this province. We need to address that. We have a Liberal Party under Iain's leadership that greenlit a male candidate with criminal convictions for serious criminal behaviors, and then expelled a young woman for posting some photos of herself. That is a very serious double standard that we need to get past, because those types of double standards put us on the national stage in a very, very negative way, and they impact all of us, and they have ramifications through our diverse communities and through our population. So walk the walk in the political parties as well. I'm proud of the record of the PC party. I'm certainly proud of the work that Betty Thomas has done on our behalf.
Mr. Rankin, how do you respond to that?
Well, I'm very proud of the slate of candidates that we have here, the most diverse that we've ever had in this party, 40% of them being women and 5 African Nova Scotians. We continue to ensure that we are making efforts to recruit people from across the province. We're going to continue to do that, and as I've said, I'm proud of the nominations that we've made to the bench, and then subsequently, since I've been Premier, we've nominated people, first African Nova Scotian woman as our Public Service Commissioner. We have other deputy ministers, other senior leadership roles. That's what I'm going to continue to do.
All right, well, Mr. Rankin,
Your party forced a young lady to lie about the reason that she was resigning from running as a candidate and forced her to further stigmatize mental health. That's bad. That's a disgrace, actually. What do you say to that? How is that happening in your party? You can't talk about all of the wonderful things. Renaming a department is one thing, but you got to walk the walk.
I'm proud of
Your
my record,
actions
and we're going to
matter.
continue to work on it. I trust my staff, and I'm going to continue to try to reach out to that individual.
Did
while
one
he
of your
tries to
staff tell them
cheat
to
political
lie
points on the
and
debate.
stigmatize mental
And I'm gonna
health? Did one of
continue
your
to work
staff
on
say
the
that? And
equity
is that
issues.
staff still with you?
No.
Did one of your staff members actually say, just blame your mental health and further stigma? And is that staff member still with you?
In fairness to Robin, I'm not going to speak to her through you. I've reached out now 3 times, and
I'm
look
asking
for-
about your staff member if they're still with you.
I look forward to having a conversation with Robin, but I trust my staff.
We have to walk the walk, Ian. It's really important that leaders, especially
I
3
would,
white
I
men
would
up
like,
here.
I would like to add a word on this important subject of politics and gender, to say that this is indeed a historic election in Nova Scotia because it is the first election in which a party has brought forward a slate of candidates province-wide, a majority of whom are women and gender-diverse persons. That party is the NDP, and this is a major accomplishment, I think, for the entire political culture of Nova Scotia.
All right, it is time now to move on to another audience question. Please direct your attention to the monitor.
Hi there, my name is Pam Glow-DeRoche. I am the Executive Director of the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Society, and my question today for you is in regards to the economy. If you form the new government for Nova Scotia, how is it that your new government is going to support the inclusion in the economy for urban Indigenous peoples?
All right, Mr. Rankin, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Pam, and thank you for all the work that you do at the Friendship Center. We want to make sure that when we are investing in the skills training that I referenced earlier, that we have dedicated seats and that we have pathways to ensure that we work with communities side by side. An example being the work that Nova Scotia Community College has done with elders in communities to train early childhood educators. Those are the kinds of initiatives that I'm in favor of. I know there's great success with programs through our universities, through Dalhousie. We've added to those with seats dedicated for doctors and nurses and other high-paying careers. We need to work alongside those communities so that they inform us what the best way to approach these matters are so that we do truly have that equitable recovery. And even in procurement, we're looking at our rebuilds in Cape Breton and the other monumental builds with our healthcare system. Part of that tendering process dedicates certain percentages of work to communities, from Mi'kmaq communities, African Nova Scotian communities. These are the types of initiatives that are priorities for me personally, and I'll continue to expand those as we continue to move forward and grow our population and economic growth.
Mr. Houston, I'm wondering how you, or if you led a government here, how you would make sure that the Indigenous people of this province are part of that economy.
Yeah, thank you, Pam, for raising this, and for sure we need to knock down the barriers that are preventing diverse communities from participating in the workforce, but also from accessing healthcare. For sure, we have a lot of barriers to knock down. What I would say is we have some very specific stuff in our platform about more seats for diverse communities to get into the trades, get into the programs that they're looking to get into. But Pam, really, what I want to do is work with you. I want to listen to you about what will work best. What are those barriers? I have some ideas on what I think they are, but you know very well what they are. Let's work together. Let's make sure that we grow the economy of this province over 5, 10, 15 years. That's what we're looking at, and make sure that everyone is participating in that economy. And we can do that. We put some innovative policy forward to make sure that happens in this province, and that is my focus. And my focus is on making sure that every Nova Scotian sees this province as a place where they can reach their full potential, where they can really thrive. It's all possible, but it's only possible if we work together. So thank you, Pam.
All right, Mr. Burrill, how would you address the situation?
At the center of our platform for economic planning and economic development is a proposal that immediately following the election, we convene across Nova Scotia a Green Jobs Task Force to provide multi-sectoral guidance to how we are going to move into the whole new green economy, which is really the most significant economic transition in a century and a half. And that is to be composed of Aboriginal voices, of African Nova Scotian voices, of university voices, of municipal voices, of resource sector voices, of labor movement voices, of business sector voices, and is in its multi-sectoralness is much to be distinguished from the economic planning agency that the Liberal Party has put forward, their Economic Growth Council, which is really much of the usual kind of business talking heads planning that we've seen over the years. The major transition that we are moving into renewables and retrofitting and the green economy needs the kind of incorporation of all voices that our questioner has spoken about.
All right.
Gary on the committee they put together.
All right, gentlemen.
Very disappointing.
I think the carbon carrier is part of that leading green jobs advancement. They have a seat at the table at the Economic Growth Council. That green sustainable revolution is already underway, and Nova Scotians are leading it.
Okay. Gentlemen, we saw violence and racism around the Mi'kmaq fisheries last year in this province. The fishery, I know, as you well do, is a federal issue, except when it comes to the purchase of the catch. Would your government sanction the purchase of all moderate livelihood caught seafood in Nova Scotia, even if agreements are not reached between the bands and Ottawa? Mr. Houston, maybe I'll get you to start.
Well, first you need to define moderate livelihood, and that's the province needs to take a very active role in really pressuring the federal government. And I know Iain doesn't like to pressure the federal government on these types of matters because he reports to the Prime Minister, but we need to define moderate livelihood. And here's what I'd say: there will be a moderate livelihood in this province, but we need to get it figured out so that their catch can be purchased and all these things. Nova Scotians have always focused on conservation. We're very concerned about the long-term future of the fishery, and that's all Nova Scotians, no matter their background. So we need to make sure that first the federal government does its job, defines moderate livelihood, and then we can work with communities across this province to make sure it's implemented. Because you're right, we saw families, the violence, families broken apart, communities broken apart. Incredibly sad when failed government policy leads to those types of things happening in this province. We need to do better.
All right, Mr. Rankin, purchase of the catch, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so our regulations with our own fisheries department is dependent on licensing through the federal government. So if they license the catch from moderate livelihood and they have that set up, then it becomes legal.
Okay, you wouldn't change that?
I wouldn't change our regulations, no. It's dependent on the federal government. They are the lead on that. And as Tim says, moderate livelihood definition does come through the federal government.
Mr. Burrill.
Are you putting the pressure on them to get this
Because
resolved?
Mr. Burrill has the floor right now.
It makes no sense, in my judgment, that we should have a court-mandated right to a moderate livelihood fishery when that court-mandated right is not able to be given practical effect by reason of the provincial regulations. So I think that provincial regulations need to be adjusted so that they are in line with the capacity to give effect to the court-mandated right of a moderate livelihood fishery.
Okay.
All right, thank you
for that.
All right, we want to move on to the environment now. We have a legislated target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 53% below 2005 levels by the year 2030. Some environmentalists have argued that in order to get there, we need 90% of our electricity coming from renewable sources by that date of 2030. Do you support that goal? And if so, what will you do in the early stages of your mandate to help reach that target? Mr. Rankin.
So right now we see a path to 80%. We put that in regulation. We know that the PC party has copy and pasted that into their platform, but it is already the law now in the province to reach 80%. We also committed to finding a path forward to get off of coal by 2030. That should be a main objective for any government, to ensure we have cleaner air, to ensure that we protect power rates for future generations, because We're going to have carbon pricing impacts in the future, and we're at the mercy of markets importing coal in here. So we now have wind power and solar, some of the cheapest forms of energy in this province. It's going to create jobs in rural communities, but we do need to continue to press forward to bring on more clean energy onto the system, and that's going to create jobs and it's going to benefit our air.
All right, Mr. Burrill.
Yesterday, I joined 3 16 and 17-year-olds in Dartmouth, climate activists, to make an announcement of the NDP's position that we stand for a greenhouse gas emissions reduction target of 50% below 1990 levels by 2030. And I couldn't help but reflect on how the world has changed so much since I was at their stage of life. When I was at their stage of life, it was inconceivable that we would have a summer where in 1 week 500 people would die in BC and causes related to heat and to wildfires. In fact, when I was at their stage of the game, my family comes from Yarmouth County. Whenever people came to Yarmouth from other parts of the province, we had to explain to them what a tick was, because there were only ticks in the southwestern part of the province. This is one of the many, many effects of climate change. So we are talking about an emergency. That means action that is urgent. That means action that is bold, that is singular, that means business. So for us, that means having a greenhouse gas emissions reduction target that is actually consistent, in line with our international commitment to do our part to hold global heating within 1.5 degrees by 2030. That also means not 80% renewables target for 2030, but 90%. And it means as well protection of land on a much more bold basis going forward than we've seen from the Liberal Party to this point.
Mr. Houston, do you like the 90% target? If so, if yes or no, and what would you plan to do to reach the target that you think you should reach within that early stage of the mandate?
Yeah, we have in our platform the 80%. But here's what I would say is if empty promises were a renewable resource, we'd have solved the climate change crisis a long time ago. There's no more time for empty promises in this province. And I'm proud of the PC Party's record on the environment. It was a PC Party that worked with the other parties to create some groundbreaking legislation that led nationally. And even Stephen McNeil referred to how important that PC law was in setting the path for this province. So for me, it's what I want to make sure is that when I'm Premier, I build on that record. Work with the other parties. This works best when we work together. There's no question. And we put out some stuff in our platform, and I will tell you that what we put in our platform is real and it's achievable. And I get that from, my dad is a military man, and he's a man of few words. I don't think I inherited that particular trait from him. But when he speaks, we listen. That's the lens that I approach politics through. And that is the lens which we've put down our environmental policy. The things that we say in our platform, we will do. They are real. And that's protect more land, as Gary says, up to 20% by 2030. And the 80, we're at the 80 by 2030. We need to continue to do better, and we have to do it together. When you look at the floods that are happening, when you look at the wildfires, somebody told me there was snow in South Africa. When you look at what's happening in the world, it is obvious that our climate is changing. We don't need political bickering over what's possible. We just need to work together and get it done. That's my focus.
All right, we have another video question that may tie into this if you want to have a listen.
Hi, my name is Gurprasad Gurumurthy. I'm Energy Coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Our communities are already facing the impacts of climate change in the form of extreme weather events, sea level rise, and more. What will you do to ensure our communities remain resilient and adapt in the face of climate and biodiversity crises?
Mr. Burrill, would you like to take a crack at that?
Yes, certainly. So in addition to the things that I just mentioned, a greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, a 90% renewables, 30% of land protection, there's a number of things that are a very parallel way important. So we need to get off coal altogether by 2030. We need to make tuition at the Nova Scotia Community College free so that people who are transitioning from carbon-intensive industries into the new carbon-free economy will have an opportunity to be able to do that. We need to move towards a new building code by step that will get us to a place for net zero by 2032. But I want to go back to the question, if I might, of land protection for a second, because it's central to this. And I want to ask Mr. Rankin, it has been very disappointing to many people the preparation surreptitiously for sale for a golf course of Owl's Head. And it has been further disappointing in the period since that you have become Premier that you have not reversed that decision. Now, I know that you present yourself as someone who is deeply convinced about the climate emergency and has a climate commitment, but I want to ask you, how can you credibly present yourself as a climate champion when you have not reversed the decision to turn Owl's Head into a golf course?
Well, first of all, we're protecting over 60 new parks that are the size of Owl's Head. But it is important that when you're Premier or Minister, that you're looking out for all Nova Scotians and that you listen to them. The people of Little Harbour came to government and asked if we would consider a proposal. That's what happened, and we are going down the right process to see. There's a public engagement plan, there's Mi'kmaq consultation, it's early in the process, but I think if you go down to Little Harbour and you speak to the people down there who have almost every second house a sign that's asking for a golf course, that we should consider that. But let me be clear, I will not be in favor of any project that has any long-term adverse impacts to any sensitive ecosystem. What I will do is listen to communities when they want to have their voice heard.
I think it's an important point that Gary raises, because obviously as Minister of the Environment, you have 3 court cases against you, and in one case in particular, the judge said you failed to live up to your duties to protect. And I think it's just really important for Nova Scotians to know that, you know, when you present yourself as you can't present yourself as an environmentalist and do what happened at Owl's Head. You can't do both. And we know that in Cumberland, just in Cumberland County over the last couple of weeks, you approved an order to bury years of plastic. But you can't do these things behind closed doors, and you can't do them and call yourself an environmentalist. We all have an obligation to preserve our planet. That's not a partisan thing. That's just a human thing. But when a property like Owl's Head goes through a process to get on a protected list, it's not fair that their government goes behind a closed door and takes it off that list. You can't do consultations after the fact and make up for the point that you did what you did. You took it off behind closed doors. It was a secret deal. It's wrong. You can't do that to Nova Scotians. We all have an obligation to them. We need to be open, fair, transparent. I think what happened at Owl's Head, the backroom deal, is just an appalling thing. Okay, it should never have happened.
Let's let Mr. Rankin reply to that.
It's still working through the process, and both the NDP party and the Conservative party had an opportunity and consciously chose not to protect it. Owl's Head was on a list of candidate lists to look at a protection. When we came into government, there was less than 10.
It was on the list after going through a process.
Let him respond.
You took it off the list.
When we came into government,
that's very different.
There was less than 10% land protection. We've moved the needle up to 13%. Now we're on track to hit 14%. We clearly have priorities for conservation, but you need to look at listening to an obligation for the public service is listening to every voice. I had an obligation to listen to that community. They're going through a process. If there is loud opposition and there's science that says that it should not happen, then I'll oppose it.
Okay. Mr. Rankin, I want to ask you, one of the cornerstones of your leadership campaign was a strong, robust Biodiversity Act. And you have been accused of gutting that act in the face of criticism from industry and others. Given your actions on that file, what makes you a good steward of the environment?
Because you need to listen to people. And I think that the voice of landowners and different industry groups, agriculture, hardworking people, they wanted to see changes. They said that they want to work with government. I take them for their word. All of the measures in the Act now are voluntary. I think that they do want to help us protect more environment with biodiversity management zones on their land. But it was a process, and we need to make sure that we're listening. The Conservative Party, just like their federal cousins, voted against it. I know there's people in that party that are aligned with the federal Conservative Party that either don't think that climate change is real or they think that it's not the threat that it actually is. We need to see that the environment, the economy go together. We can grow jobs, green jobs. We can work with traditional industries to make sure that they're modernized. We came out with an innovation rebate to help industry with 25% rebates to invest in capital, to grow jobs. But it's not an either or, and the Liberal Party does not think that it's mutually exclusive. Okay. This is the first biodiversity. This is the first biodiversity, if I can, the first Biodiversity Act in North America, and we're proud of that.
For all the sins of omission and commission of the Conservative Party, it was not the Conservative Party that gutted the Biodiversity Act and took it from an act that was to cover all of Nova Scotia Scotia and shrunk it down to what is really not much more than a glorified biodiversity brochure, applying only to Crown lands. So I want to ask you, how can you put yourself forward credibly as a champion of the climate when you are the author of the shrinking and the shriveling of this incredibly important piece of legislation?
So you supported the act in the end, and it's because I believe that Nova Scotians want to work with us. We have an act that we can work with.
A couple of things.
And
First
it's
off,
voluntary.
I want
So
to
Mr. Rankin, finish this point. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I think that biodiversity protection is important, and this is why it's a challenge, because we were the first to do it in North America.
Okay.
So we made the process.
First thing I want to be very, very clear on is both gentlemen, it might have been a mistake, but we'll clear it up. There is no Conservative Party in the province. I'm the leader of the Nova Scotia Progressive Conservative Party. As a matter of fact, I am only beholden to Nova Scotians. I'm not beholden to any federal leader. So we're the Progressive Conservative Party. And that target that Mr. Rankin referred to on protected property, he was trying to meet the very ambitious targets of the PC legislation. It was PC law. NDP followed along with it, and we need to keep doing better. So what I would say on the Biodiversity Act, and Mr. Rankin, yes, you do need to listen to Nova Scotians. You had two chances. You tried to jam that piece of legislation through when you were a minister, and then in your new role, you tried to jam it again. And now you want to listen to Nova Scotians. The time to listen to Nova Scotians is before you take a piece of legislation to the floor of the legislature. You actually go out and look them in the eye and talk to them. And this Biodiversity Act, I voted against this particular act because he is right, Iain is right, that Nova Scotia landowners, they are stewards of the land. They make their living off the land. They have a huge vested interest in protecting their land and doing what's right. They want to do what's right. They should be worked with up front, not after the fact on the floor of the legislature. It's a shame what happened to them, and I would be very worried. 2 times Iain has tried to just ram this through. I would be very worried that he's not done yet. My approach as Premier will be to work with Nova Scotians because I know that they want what's best for our planet and they want what's best for their
Mr.
property.
Houston, I want to ask you about an issue right in your backyard. Do you support the proposed plan from Northern Pulp to pump treated effluent into Pictou Harbour?
Well, listen, this has been this is a tough issue in our community. It's been very divisive for sure, and I've been leading on this file since the beginning. As a matter of fact, way back in 2018, I wrote to Iain when he was minister, and I said, raise the standard. Use a more, scrutinize these applications more. And at the time, Iain said, it's not necessary. We don't need to scrutinize it more. But where I am is that it's government's responsibility to set the standard. And we should set a very, very high standard in this province. Nobody wants to go backwards in this province. We only want to go forwards. So set a very high standard and then put a process in place to determine if that standard has been met. So it's not for a politician to say, yes, we're going to approve that, or no, we're not going to approve that. It's for a politician to set the standard and then set the process. And there's lots of examples we can do to make sure that the process is open and transparent and that people can have trust that the process has done its job, because there's a lot of anxiety. I share that anxiety, but for elected officials, set the standard. And I'm happy to see that after all these years, the government has now said that a higher level of scrutiny is appropriate for this in a Class 2 assessment. Iain didn't think it was necessary back then, but I'm glad you do now, because it is. We need to highly scrutinize these applications.
Project. Finally, Northern Pulp's putting forward a different project that's more than just a modification of the mill. They're building a full new effluent treatment facility. They need to go through that process. But where were you in supporting us with the tough decision to close Boat Harbour? 4 times, the government of Nova Scotia promised Pictou Landing First Nation that we would close that. That is one of the biggest examples of environmental racism in the country.
I voted for the legislation.
He was
I voted
sitting
for
on
that
the fence.
legislation because it was a well.
Just let Mr.
No, I
Rankin
mean,
speak.
I voted for the legislation.
Sure, you voted for the legislation in
but I voted against the
2014.
Biodiversity Act
But
because
you
I do
had
what's
your
right
caucus
based on
members
what's in front of
out
me.
protesting with workers for us to break that commitment to First Nations, for the First
That's
Nations.
just not true.
Mr. Burrill,
That's
do you
just
want in
not
on
true,
this?
Iain, and you know it.
Let me answer this question absolutely unequivocally. Northern Pulp should never be allowed to do to Pictou Harbour what they did to Boat Harbour. Period. End of story.
Mr. Burrill, then, how do you balance the needs of industry in this province with the protection of the environment?
Well, we are entering a tremendous economic transition. where the economic dynamism is in fact in the world of retrofitting, in the world of renewables, and in a carbon-free economy as it is emerging with tremendous rapidity across the world and here also in Nova Scotia. So this dualism, which has defined a lot of discussion with this economy or environment, this is really no longer a part of the contemporary economic picture, and this is why a Green Jobs Task Force is so essential for us, so that we do not miss out on the tremendous opportunities of moving to what is really a profoundly new economy as we move into a post-carbon era.
All right, well, we want to move into our final section, questions from our audience. We've been fielding questions all week, and we've had more coming in through the debate. So I have Jilly McJackie. How are you going to ensure home ownership is possible for Nova Scotians? Mr. Rankin.
So again, we have a population that's going to reach 1 million people within the next few years. We need to make sure that government is paying close attention to the ramifications of that and the supply. Because it's coming down and people want to be here, we need to make the right investments and partner with communities, partner with municipalities, who are the ones that set the planning standards. So we need legislation to help them and enable them and work with them. So we have accepted the Housing Commission recommendations, every single one. We plan on implementing those, but there is work to do because now we have people coming from all over. We have the most in-migration from other provinces than any other province except for BC. That's because people want to live here, and we do need to make some adjustments to help people for housing affordability.
Mr. Burrill, what would you do about that problem?
How can people possibly save for a down payment when their rent is going up regularly and repeatedly by $200, $300, $400, even more than that, $100? One of the great advantages of permanent rent control, and this is why it is applied in so many jurisdictions across the country, is that it does permit for people to have an opportunity to know that the rent cannot go up any more than the consumer price index, except in exceptional circumstances, and therefore they can plan for putting together what they need in order to get a down payment. Permanent rent control is one of the most important means by which we can strengthen the path towards home ownership in Nova Scotia.
All right, Mr. Houston, how do you make home ownership attainable here in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, thank you, Jillian, for raising that. And I was, speaking to young people this week who said, look, it was their dream to own a home by the time they were 30 years old. And they're working, they're saving, they're doing everything right, and they said to me that we feel like that's slipping away, and that's a painful thing to hear. So what we need in this province is we need a government with vision, who make sure that when those people move here, that they can have a doctor, that they can have access to healthcare, and a government with a vision that makes sure we're adding to the housing stock of the province. So we're going to do that by making sure we have more young people in the trades, helping build the future of this province, but also very, very specifically, Jillian, on day one, our Better Paycheck guarantee will put more money into the hands of working families of this province. And our Nova Scotia Loyal program, I really can't tell you how excited I am about this. I really believe that is going to lead to tremendous economic growth, particularly in our rural areas. But Jillian, I want you to believe and feel and know that you can own a home in this province. And I will do everything I can to make sure that dream comes true for you and everyone in your age cohort.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. Another question from an audience member, this one from Iron Mountain Cabins. What are you going to do about Airbnbs? The government promised to, quote, level the playing field, but from our perspective, they're paying residential taxes. Mr. Burrill, do you want to start us off here?
Yes, it's essential that we strengthen the regulations around Airbnbs. We strengthen the regulations around their registration and around the fees to be paid by Airbnbs, including by their platforms. We do not want to be in the situation where our terribly low vacancy rate is exacerbated by as what are often referred to as ghost hotels. This requires stronger regulation than the Liberals have brought into this state, and we in the NDP are prepared to bring it in.
How do you respond to that, Mr. Rankin?
We did bring in regulations. So the shared economy is regulated in the province. That came out of consultation, and we need to continuously look at what that impact is having in communities. And right now, Again, because of our population increase and the limited housing stock, that may need to be reviewed again. But we do have some form of regulation out there, and we also need to be fair to people, because commercial tax can have an impact. And if people need that second income, not everyone has pensions in this province. Not everyone has the types of benefits that you get. So it's an important discussion that needs to be had, and I'm not opposed to reviewing regulation as it should be routinely.
Mr. Houston, what would you do about Airbnbs in this province?
Well, first off, I've actually been to Iron Mountain. It's a wonderful facility in a beautiful setting, and you've worked hard to build something there that people will want to visit. And my focus as Premier is to make sure that we build our tourism industry. That means investing in the various regions, working with them, what's best to promote your region, how can we work with all these operators to make sure that we help them promote themselves, because people want to come to this province, they want to visit this province, and they want to stay all over this province. So Airbnbs and traditional hotels and lodges, we need to make sure that the playing field is level, but we also have a long way to go in making sure that we're working with our tourism operators to make sure that they have everything they need, including a good road to get up to the facility. There's a lot to do, and we can do it. We have every potential in this province, and let's look at the big picture as to how we get more people to come and see this beautiful province and stay in a wonderful place like yours.
All right, we have another audience member question. Zachary Miller from Harbourville. How do you plan to reinvigorate small communities in Nova Scotia, ones who are struggling to keep even their community halls open? Mr. Rankin.
Yeah, thanks, Zachary. So one of the probably most robust infrastructure programs we have is connecting high speed. I think that's one of the most important equalizers for government to be a part of. So by 2023, we will reach the target of 99%. That is a significant investment that Nova Scotians need in rural communities. We also need to support initiatives like placemaking, other initiatives like making sure that we build those livable communities that support active transit. We've put a lot of funding into the ways that we can move people around this province that's more environmentally friendly. But these are the partnerships that are needed to tap into the momentum that is happening organically right now, because people want to live here. People are moving here and they have workplaces in Toronto and other places in the country. This is the quality of life and people want to be part of it. Now we have all of our counties growing in population. Government has a role to make sure that we're partnering in those core services, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
All right.
Government also has a role to make sure they can have a doctor. We can't grow our small communities across this province when they can't access health care. We had an incident here in downtown Halifax where one of my colleagues had a medical emergency. We called an ambulance. 25 minutes for an ambulance to get there, 2 kilometers from the hospital. Now, if we didn't have trained medical personnel in the room in that meeting, I don't know what would have happened. But what if that happened in Guysborough? What if that happened in the rural town that Zachary is living in and thinking of? So we need to make sure that they have access to healthcare. Okay. Number one responsibility of government, but I will tell you this, we're very focused on building the economy of our rural Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia Loyal will do that. Happy to talk about that at any time, but we need to make sure that government does its job. Healthcare, education, housing, and an opportunity to have a job for the working people of this province. That's what government has a responsibility to do.
Mr. Burrill, you'd like
all
to
of
get in
those
here.
things.
Well, Mr. Rankin is right to put forward the importance of internet, and Mr. Houston is right to speak about the importance to rural Nova Scotia of health care. And we should also, though, not forget the importance of rural schools. You cannot have a thriving local community without a thriving local school. And it's important for us to put schools right at the center of the community's life. One of the proposals we have in the NDP is to open up a school food program comprehensively across the province. This, of course, builds on the availability of local food. It strengthens relationships with local producers, and it makes the school more a hub in the life of the community as a whole. This is one of the key ingredients for vitality and vibrancy in rural communities, and I think it needs to not be overlooked.
Okay, we're going to just go quickly around the room with one short question, short answer here. Will you commit, if you become Premier, to establishing fixed election dates in this province?
Yeah, we need fixed election dates in this province. There's no question that that's something we should have, and absolutely we'll do it.
Mr. Burrill.
Yes.
And Mr. Rankin.
If we had a fixed election date, we would have had our election in the third wave. So I think we need that flexibility.
You would not commit to fixed election dates? Why do you think Nova Scotians need an election right now?
Well, there's a fixed limit, 5 years. And right now, if we would have had that as 4 years, then we would have had an election in the middle of a third wave. So I think flexibility is required.
Okay.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for questions tonight. Our debate ends with closing statements from each of you. The order was decided by drawing lots. The first to go, Mr. Houston.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Gary and Ian. All three of us are privileged to be here. There's no question about that. And despite our political differences, you have a right to expect that we're all held to the same high standard of behavior. And I tell you this, as Premier, I will give you everything I have to make sure that your life is better. We can put Nova Scotia, we can put more Nova Scotians back to work in better jobs and fix the healthcare crisis. We can support our traditional industries and build a climate change plan that is right for our environment. We can welcome doctors, investors, students, tourists alike, and protect our traditions and our heritage. And what I would say to Nova Scotians is, no matter how long you've lived in this province, no matter who you voted for in the past, no matter how you vote federally, no matter the color of your skin, your gender, who you love, how you pray, or what language you speak, a Tim Houston government will listen to you, will respect you, and will do everything in our power that you can access healthcare and that life is more affordable for you. Thank you for listening tonight. You've heard some of the reasons why I'm running to be Premier. There's a better way in this province. That's why I'm running to be Premier, and I humbly ask for your vote in this election. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Houston, thank you very much. As per the rules, Mr. Rankin, you're next.
Thank you, Tom. Tonight, we heard a little bit more of the Liberal plan to take Nova Scotia forward and capitalize on the opportunities that are right before us. I had the privilege of serving as a minister of two important portfolios and then as Premier during one of the most difficult times this province has ever seen. Because of your hard work and a strong public health team and good government, we are among the leaders on how we tackled the pandemic. I'm becoming a father this fall, and I'm excited about the momentum we've been able to get with a strong pandemic response to build a better future in Nova Scotia. We sacrificed for each other. We listened to public health protocols, and we are in a good position, but we have more work to do. We know we can do more. You can vote for economic growth. You can vote for a clean and sustainable environment, for a province that is more affordable, that supports families, women, citizens no matter your age, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. I'm asking for your vote in this election. I'm asking for you to support your Liberal candidate on August 17th. This is our time. This is our future. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Burrill, the final closing statement goes to you.
If we in the NDP are given the opportunity to govern, these things will happen in Nova Scotia. Permanent rent control will be implemented within a month of the new government's swearing in. A system of same-day, next-day mental health clinics will be set up across the province, just as they are in the other provinces of the Atlantic region. Nova Scotia's greenhouse gas emissions reduction commitment will be changed to 50% below 1990 levels by 2030, which is what is needed for us to do our part to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees. Fees for school-based before and after school care will be done away with, saving parents over $3,000 per child every year. Adequate staff-to-resident ratios in nursing homes will be legislated and will be funded so that the care that's needed is the care that is provided. I want to be very clear. If either of our opponents are elected, these things will not happen. We need them to happen. It's time for something better. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Burrill, thank you very much. And that is it for our 2021 Leaders Debate. We want to thank all three of you for being here tonight to participate in this. And now it's really up to you to choose your local representative and have your hand in deciding who forms the next government in the province of Nova Scotia.
And we hope, of course, you'll join us on election night, August 17th, here on CBC Television, also on CBC Radio 1. And of course, we'll have up-to-date results and analysis on our website. That's cbc.ca/ns. And we also have a new app called Vote Compass that'll help you figure out, where the parties stand on the issues that matter to you most. And you can find that at cbc.ca/votecompass. That's a useful tool to check out.
It sure is. And as Amy says, we will be there. CBC News will be there. You can follow every twist and turn in this election campaign. Gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for being part of this tonight. And thank you so much for watching us. Good night from Halifax.
All right, good night.